New data from NASA and NOAA shows that global climate temperatures
critical thresholds for
1.5 degrees global warming
in the next 5 years.
Some people may say, well, why discuss the God question when there are so many persisting issues in the world? Look at climate change, that's pretty bad. We should be discussing that. What about worldwide poverty? Wars? Who will win the next election? We, the theists, say that the root cause of all problems is lack of God consciousness. And the atheists say that religion causes all the problems. Thoughtful dialogue is rare. Let's take another controversial topic. It's getting forgotten now. 9/11.
American 11, climb maintain level 350.
It's called a conspiracy theory to doubt the official narrative that two planes piloted by terrorists flew into the top of what at the time were the twin towers of the World Trade Center in New York City, and as a result, both of the towers went doot, 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 doot. They collapsed in exactly the manner that they would have done had it been a controlled demolition from the bottom. And then after that, a third building connected with the World Trade Center, into which no plane had flown, also out of commiseration or whatever, also collapsed and blew up. There are experts on both sides of this issue. It's very complex and many detailed points that only structural engineers can debate, yet there's a rift, there's a disagreement.
I would have done a legitimate investigation to find out what exactly happened on 9/11. How did they know who did this so quickly like they did Lee Harvey Oswald?
I'm going to put this steel in the back of this anvil, and I'm going to lift this 250-pound anvil with this bar of steel. Do you see how the structural steel is supporting this anvil? It's very hot, but not melted. Obviously, it is not melted. I put this in the anvil. Now watch this. I'm going to take my pinky finger, half-inch solid steel. Check it out. It's a freaking noodle. Your argument is invalid. Get over it. Find a job.
As with many conspiracy theories, it means that if it's actually an inside job, then it means that a huge number of people are involved in a cover-up. And you'd expect some whistleblowers. Of course, whistleblowers often get blown away. But anyway, the point I'm making, I don't want to get into a big discussion of 9/11. It's unfortunate, whatever the cause. But I'm just bringing it up to make the point that even though it's a complex issue, and if experts on either side start discussing, only they who know the technical details can really get into it in great depth. So it's hard to understand for a layman, like most of us. However, this issue is very small compared to the issue, the complexity of how the universe could have come into being, let alone why. And that's one of several reasons, one major reason why it's hard to get a meaningful debate between theists and atheists. As the two generic worldviews, it's not that all theists have the same take on everything and all atheists have the same take on everything. They're two generic worldviews, but they're based on opposite premises, neither of which can be proved or disproved, although both sides will insist that they are proved and the other side is disproved. The typical atheist of today believes that nothing should be accepted to be real, true, or existent unless it can be verified by the scientific method. The theist, however, implicitly accepts as the basis of his worldview the existence of that which by its very nature is beyond human perception and ratiocination. Committed atheists and theists can never agree, however much they debate, because their core premises are opposed. So both theists and atheists, they have pretty much the same sensual and mental capacities, same percepts, but they come to a different conclusion. Bertrand Russell, great atheistic philosopher of the 20th century, said that, well, there could be a teapot floating, orbiting out there in space, which we can't see. You could propose it, it's possible, but there's no evidence, he says. They're taking it to an absurdity. And they'll point that, you see, previously the ancient Greeks believed in Zeus as the head of the gods, and the ancient Romans believed in Jupiter as the head of the gods, and they come to the conclusion it's all poppycock. There is no God. Theists intuit, feel, experience God in their lives. By accepting a priori the existence of God to be a fact, they see the hand of God in everything. One reason there could be little point of theists debating does God exist with atheists is because the atheists accept a standard of proof whereby God's existence cannot be proved. In other words, they start off with an a priori assumption that there is only matter. There cannot be anything transcendental. By that standard, the existence of anything abstract, such as love and the mind, cannot be proved to exist. The scientific method, as it's understood by the majority of materialistic scientists, they put it in a box, and there's nothing outside that box. Atheistic scientists are horrified by genuine scientists who have done their work, who've done their degrees through legitimate universities and say, hey, look, this science seems to point to God. They're horrified by such scientists. They say that such scientists are abusing science, discrediting science. So you see, it's very emotional and everyone's fixed to their point. However, there are many distinguished scientists, such as Francis S. Collins, who was the director of the Human Genome Project. That's a big position in the scientific world.
I am arguing not that the evolutionary process is incapable of generating complexity. I think it totally is. You and I are in the same place here.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about that, yes.
But you said that, well, it's happened just because of the laws of physics. I want to take this back to that step. Where did those come from?
Well, let's get to that then, because you keep getting to that, and that I believe that's a very profound. I mean, if somebody was going to convince me of the need for a God, it would be there.
He argues that the natural sciences, if we look at them objectively, they naturally should tend to promote a positive presumption of faith. Richard Dawkins wrote that he's not so much bewildered by Christian belief in a cosmic lawgiver, but to their beliefs in the details of Christianity, such as the resurrection and the forgiveness of sins. I'm quoting here from Alistair McGrath, Cambridge University, adversary of Dawkins, who wrote a book called Dawkins' God. So he wrote that in that book, Dawkins' God, that the debate between atheism and religious belief has gone on for centuries, and just about every aspect of it has been explored to the point where even philosophers seem bored with it. The outcome is a stalemate. Nobody can prove God's existence, and nobody can disprove it. Here's a statement from Freeman Dyson. He's actually one of the most respected and famous scientists of recent times. He died recently in 2020. Richard Dawkins, the great hero of atheism, described Freeman Dyson as one of the world's most distinguished physicists. So here's what he has to say about this debate and the difficulty of these two worldviews, science and religion. Although that in itself, to say that science is one worldview and religion is another, is a kind of compartmentalization which is probably invalid. Anyway, Freeman Dyson wrote that science and religion are two windows that people look through, trying to understand the big universe outside, trying to understand why we are here. The two windows give different views, but they look out at the same universe. Both views are one-sided, neither is complete. Both leave out essential features of the real world, and both are worthy of respect. Trouble arises when either science or religion claims universal jurisdiction, when either religious or scientific dogma claims to be infallible. Religious creationists and scientific materialists are equally dogmatic and insensitive. By their arrogance, they bring both science and religion into disrepute. The media exaggerate their numbers and importance. The media rarely mention the fact that the great majority of religious people belong to moderate denominations that treat science with respect, or the fact that the great majority of scientists treat religion with respect, so long as religion does not claim jurisdiction over scientific questions. Topics such as the origins of everything, the purpose, the meaning of life, or absence of any purpose or meaning, such topics are always going to be far bigger than we tiny beings are going to be able to work out with our tiny little brains. Yeah, we're tiny little ants. It's like little ants running around, thinking that we can work it all out. There's a great philosopher in the ant community, Dr. Ant, PhD, announces to all the ants, "I am 99.9% sure that persistent rumors of human existence are untrue." Plato's cave, famous analogy. Plato gave the idea of some people who are sitting in a cave, all facing in one direction, tied up, they're prisoners. There's a wall in front of them. There's fire burning behind them, but they can't turn around to see that, so they can see the light from the fire on the wall in front of them, and they can see their own shadows, and they can see other shadows. There are people behind them who are making various movements, but that's all they know and that's all they can see, and that's it. For them, that's reality. They can't know of any reality beyond what they see. Then Plato goes on to develop this thought experiment that one of the captors escapes and finds out what's going on and understands that what he and the other prisoners had thought of as reality is a misrepresentation of a tiny part of reality. Once he goes outside the cave and gradually goes and sees the whole world all around him, and takes him time to adjust and assimilate it all, and then he realizes that what he and the others were seeing in the cave is only a tiny, tiny little bit of the whole of possible experience, and that too, because of their lack of knowledge of so much which is beyond it, that too is a perverted understanding or misunderstanding of what is going on. So when the former captor returns to try to explain to those who are still captives, they think he's crazy. What nonsense are you talking? In the Vedic tradition, a similar example is given of a frog in a well. A frog lives in a deep, dark well, and as far as the frog is concerned, that's all there is. And it doesn't make any sense. It's meaningless to think of anything beyond the well. And then, one time, a wandering frog, a world traveler, comes in, jumps into the well, and starts telling all the frogs in the well that there's a big world beyond, even there's a huge ocean, so vast body of water, and the frogs in the well, who've only seen the well, they don't know anything else, and they're quite happy in the well. They get their food, the little mosquitoes they catch and eat. They live in a crevice on the side of the wall in the well, and they think this guy's completely crazy. How can it be true? We all know what's going on. This guy's just a nutcase. So what's the point? To look beyond the well is more intelligent. To think that there's more than shadows on the wall in the cave is more intelligent. To think that all of reality is within the scope of what we can observe is not very intelligent. It's actually intelligent to think that there should be something more. So scientists are very proud of their knowledge and their achievements, and they say, we don't need God to explain anything. But they will never be able to know how much they don't know. Now, that in and of itself is not an argument for God. Someone who says that the scientists don't know everything, and therefore what I am saying is just as valid as what the scientists say. Well, that's a non sequitur, which means that you make one statement, and on the basis of that statement, you make another statement. But if the premise does not logically lead to the second statement, that's called a non sequitur, which means it doesn't follow. For instance, it's known that scientists cannot explain how gravity works, but you can't deduce from that gravity doesn't exist. You'd have to explain it scientifically. Or Darwinian evolutionary theory is incomplete, so God must have designed everything. That's also a non sequitur. However, if good evidence is brought to show that there is an intelligent designer behind the universe, then that's not a non sequitur, that's science.